last Friday on the show, I talked a lot about the David Culley hire with the Houston Texans, and I also combined that with my take of absolute shock on how Eric Bieniemy has once again, for the second straight coaching carousel cycle, for the second straight year that Eric Bieniemy has not come away with a head coaching job. And I talked a lot about David Culley and how I felt that it was a stretch of a hire for the Houston Texans, regardless of the fact that Culley has had 27 years of coaching experience, multiple quarterback coaching and wide receiver coaching positions in his 27 years. But I felt like the fact that he has never held a coordinator's position, he's never had another head coaching job, and the fact that the Houston Texans had potentially Deshaun Watson's approval and, final straw on the line, the Texans went out and hired David Culley instead of hiring somebody like Eric Bieniemy. And I thought that was a big stretch of a decision, regardless of whether or not David Culley actually ends up being a good hire. That remains to be seen. But in the moment, I thought, wow, with Deshaun Watson on the line, potentially your last ditch effort to keep Deshaun Watson in Houston, you go and hire a Ravens assistant head coach who has never held a coordinator's position, who's never had a head coaching job in the NFL. And I was pretty content with that take at the time, but after, watching it back, cutting up the highlights for YouTube, I decided, well, maybe I was a little bit unfair towards David Culley and a little bit too biased towards Eric Bieniemy. So that segment got left on the cutting room floor. It made its way into the podcast, but the folks of you who are specifically watching on YouTube, you didn't get to see it. And then I watched the Nick Sirianni head coach introductory press conference for the Philadelphia Eagles yesterday or Monday or whenever the press conference was. I was satisfied with my decision. I'm like, you know what? I was a bit unfair to Culley. Let's give him some time. Let's watch the introductory press conference and see how he does, and maybe he'll end up being a good hire. And, maybe I was being too biased to be Bieniemy, so we'll see. And like I said, then I watched the Sirianni press conference, and I'm like, oh my God. Now I am definitely more content, in my opinion, that I am absolutely flabbergasted that Eric Bieniemy didn't get a head coaching job. And regardless of what happens to David Culley, that remains to be seen. It's more about the how did Bieniemy not get a coaching job for the second straight year. Watching this Eagles head coach introductory press conference was one of the most awkward, cringeworthy press conferences I've seen in a long time in any league from any coach or any player. It was unsettling to get through, and maybe unsettling's not the right word, but I said about a week ago on the show that I didn't like the Sirianni hire. I think he's going to be a fall guy for the Eagles front office if and when Carson Wentz can't turn it around in Philadelphia. I said the Sirianni hire is a gamble to try and fix Wentz that probably won't pay off, and he is a guy that has no power under Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman, and they will have the ability to control him as a first-time head coach. And as I said after watching that press conference, I'm not going to say that I was right about this, because that remains to be seen. But again, how did this man get a head coaching job over somebody like Eric Bieniemy? Like, I understand the reasoning behind it, but the press conference turned me off so badly. I don't know about anybody else, but that press conference turned me off so badly. Like, he looked terrified. He absolutely looked terrified. It was like a college kid that typed up his essay for the public speaking course that everybody's required to take, and he typed it up the morning before, and he didn't look like an NFL head coach. He did not look or sound like what you would expect your professional league head coach to sound like. And honestly, I had a hard time getting through the press conference watching that. It was that awkward. Again, it also kind of felt like, I don't know, it felt like maybe like if Sirianni was a play actor or whatever, and he was brought on at the last minute and he doesn't have his line memorized, and Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie are like pushing him on stage like, come on, get out there, kid. You got it. You're going to do great. And then he sits up there, trips over his words, gives some really weird analogies to be giving for an NFL football coach. I think at one point he gave an analogy about the Villanova basketball team. in a football conference. I mean, it's just like he looked terrified. He looked absolutely terrified. Now, a couple of points here. I understand that not everybody is good at public speaking. It's difficult. This is difficult. Not everybody can do it. I understand that I'm just one guy in a room talking to a camera, but in any situation, public speaking is not easy. I was a bit of a theater dork in high school. I was in the high school play pretty much every single year that I was in high school, and I had people come up to me afterwards and say, dude, like, how did you memorize all those lines? How did you stand up there and perform them? Like, I'm not going to say so well, but how did you remember all of those enough to, go out on stage and say them all perfectly without missing a beat? And obviously some of it is practice. And I guarantee you, Nick Sirianni did not get the practice that I got while rehearsing for a high school play for this press conference, right? But my point being is that some people are good at public speaking, some people aren't, and depending on what side of the brain you're mentally favored to be. Some people are math and science people, other people are history and English people, and predominantly those who are good at history and English are also very good at public speaking, and yada yada yada. It's not for everybody, so I can definitely understand if Nick Sirianni was nervous. But if this is how Sirianni talks publicly, and this is how he interviewed for the job, I have no idea how he got the job, other than the fact that Lori and Howie Roseman were looking for a controllable yes man. And maybe that is some confirmation bias on my part, admittedly. But if how Sirianni appeared in that press conference was also how Sirianni appeared in the interviewing process, then it's no wonder why the Philadelphia Eagles hired this man, especially for what they want, which is somebody that they control, a la not Doug Peterson, into trying to correct Carson Wentz and keep Carson Wentz as the starting quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, with that all being said, communication is one of the most important qualities in my mind that a good head coach must have. Somebody who cannot, only tell you what he needs from you, but can connect with you on a personal basis and inspire you. You hear the expression, want to make you run through a wall. That is what your head coach, in my mind, is supposed to do for you. And if this is who Nick Sirianni is, if the person that we saw in the press conference is who Nick Sirianni is, again, the Eagles are not going to be inspired by him. They're not going to take in. The communication is not going to be good, and the Eagles fan base is going to eat this man alive. First impressions are everything, and this was probably one of the worst first impressions I've seen from a head coach in a long time. And there's generally two camps when it comes to this. It's either give him some slack, he was nervous, and wow, that was one of the worst things I've ever seen. And I think that even though I'm trending towards wow, that was awful, the truth of it lies somewhere in the middle. The truth lies somewhere in the middle, and somewhere, some way, somebody is conceding the fact or conceding what happened and trying to support their way of thinking by ignoring what happened. At the end of the day, all that really matters is the product that's on the football field. And not every good coach is a good interview. Not every coach is a good speaker. But at the end of the day, wouldn't you want the head coach of your professional football team to have the attribute of being able to communicate with the media well and communicate with other people well? Now, I don't know what Nick Sirianni is like behind closed doors. I don't know what he's like in his office. I don't know what he's like communicating on the football field. I don't know. Maybe when he's on the football field, he's concise and speaks eloquently and is very good at communicating. But, that's only half the job. If you're not communicating well with the front office, if you're not communicating well with the players, that is going to hinder you in the long run, especially with a team like the Philadelphia Eagles. And to bring this all back to, my thoughts on Eric Bieniemy, which is kind of what started this rant altogether, go watch an Eric Bieniemy conference. You go and type up Eric Bieniemy press conference. One of the first ones that will come up was his interview in the 2019 divisional round of the playoffs, the year that they won the Super Bowl. And he was first getting some attention for a head coaching hire, and he was fielding all these questions from reporters about it. And he sat up there with a smile. He had personality. He was funny. He was engaging, and he was eloquent in explaining what he wanted from his players, what he expected them to do, and he gave some great answers to some really frustrating questions. And then you watch that press conference and then go watch the Nick Sirianni press conference from last night or Monday or whenever it happened, and it was night and day. Night and day. And again, I will say, I went back and I saw some press conferences with Sirianni when he was with the Colts, where he was with a Zoom meeting, and his personality was mostly the same. The way that he answered the questions were mostly the same. He's got good ideas, but the way that he presented him in those press conferences was much better than the way that he presented it in the Eagles press conference. Now, the caveat is that being an offensive coordinator and being a head coach are two vastly different things in terms of what is expected from you. Obviously, there's a lot less pressure on you as an offensive coordinator. There's still pressure, but there's not that added pressure of having to handle an entire team. And, that added pressure may be getting to Sirianni. Again, this is all hypothetical. I do agree somewhat with the people that are saying, hey, this is his first head coach press conference, give him some slack. But on the other hand, it's like, come on, dude. He's been an NFL head coach. He's been having to speak with the media for at least 4 years. He should know how to speak to the media by now. I can understand if you're nervous. Public speaking isn't for everybody. Not everybody can be a theater dork like me and project in front of an audience and speak well most of the time. Obviously, sometimes I trip over my words. Not everybody is good at public speaking, and I can definitely understand if Sirianni was nervous, but at the end of the day, communication is something that you want out of your head coach. Being a good communicator, being a motivator, being able to say the right things at the right time, and being able to speak to the media. That is all extremely important. And I can understand if you're nervous, but at the end of the day, with the amount of experience that Sirianni has, he should have been able to handle that situation in that press conference better. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching this segment from the Hard Headed Sports Podcast. You've heard what I've had to say, now I'm interested to hear what you think as well. If you enjoyed this highlight from the show and want to watch more highlights from the show as they come out after the show's completion, you should definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel, and if you're interested in listening to the entire show in its full-length entirety, you should follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all very soon.